PLA. It's the world's most ubiquitous FDM 3D printing filament. It's used in biomedicine as a drug delivery system within the human body. Oh, and you can make it from potatoes. Join me as we dive into the production, properties, and applications of PLA. We'll smash stuff, blend stuff, melt stuff, print stuff, and find out why PLA is more than filament. Our world depends on plastic. In 2019, we manufactured 368 million metric tons of it. Within 15 years, we're expected to be producing double that. Given the environmental damage caused by oil-based plastics, it's clear we need an alternative. This is where renewable bioplastics come in. These biopolymers are a far more sustainable long-term option for plastic products. And get this, their production actually absorbs CO2 from the atmosphere. If you're interested in finding out more about how sustainable bioplastic production is for our current infrastructure, I've included a link in the description to a TED Talk by Vivian Tan that dives into just that. There's one bioplastic that's been researched more than any other. It's more durable, less dense, and easier to produce than other bioplastics. And you guessed it, it's PLA. So how is PLA's production different from oil-based plastics? And what about the potato? Presenting how PLA can be made from potatoes. PLA is made from renewable plant starches like corn, rice, and potatoes. These starches are mashed, blended, and fermented before going through hydrolysis to produce lactic acid. Lactic acid exists in two forms, L-lactic acid and D-lactic acid. It's kinda tiny though, so I printed some models of it that were designed by Newell from NIH 3D and are available under a Creative Commons Attributions license. This is an L-lactic acid molecule, which is a hydrocarbon made up of 3 carbons, 3 oxygens, and 6 hydrogens. As you can see, it's a mirror image of the D-lactic acid molecule. 2 lactic acid molecules are combined to make a dimer, and then go through a process called ring opening polymerization, so named for the ring shape, to produce a polymer strand. If only L-lactic acid is used to make this strand, then the polymer is called PLA. If only D-lactic acid is used, then the polymer is called PDLA. Both PLA and PDLA have a semi-crystalline structure that looks something like this. If a mixture of L and D-lactic acid is used, then the polymer is called PDLLA, and it's got an amorphous structure that looks something like this. PLLA, PDLA, and PDLLA are the 3 subfamilies of polylactic acid, or PLA. Once produced, they're usually glossy and transparent pellets that can be recolored with dyes and easily extruded to make filament. But given the differences in structure between the 2 polymer strands, it's pretty obvious that the amorphous mixture behaves differently than pure PLLA or PDLA. The mixture of the 2 has less tensile strength than PLLA, but has a higher melting point and a much wider processing range. If you're interested in what it looks like for PLA to be produced in a more professional environment, check out the video in the description titled Conversion of Food Waste into Polylactic Acid Fiber. So we've looked at the structure of PLA on a molecular level. But how does that structure impact its behavior? I'm glad you asked. I found a fascinating 2022 study on the mechanical and deteriorative properties of PLA filament under different environmental conditions by Bacher et al., and I'll do my best to illustrate it here. This study looked at the way PLA filament responded to 3 different environmental conditions. The study printed 123 of these tensile test dog bones according to ASTM standard D638, so I found the specs and made my own. In the study, they put 1 sample in room temperature, they put another in a quote-unquote natural environment at 90 degrees Fahrenheit, and a third in the oven at 150 to 170 degrees Fahrenheit. Over the course of a month, they brought some of the samples back inside, let them cool down for an hour, and then tested their tensile strength. Now, they used a universal testing machine for these tests, but unfortunately, I don't own one of those. So we'll do the next best thing. A reasonable approximation, I'm sure. Anyways, here's what they found. The samples of PLA left in the natural conditions and in the oven saw an 18% increase in their modulus of elasticity, rising from 3 gigapascals to about 3.5 gigapascal over the course of a month due to an increase in crystallinity. Additionally, the ductility of the samples nearly tripled as time passed. Now, one of the key factors that's limited PLA's ability to replace oil-based plastics is its lack of ductility. PLA is more brittle than oil-based competitors like PET, with an elongation at break that hovers around 2.5%. What the study by Bakar et al. Suggests is that heat treatment post-PLA production is a viable alternative to adding natural fibers before production to increase ductility. While heat treatment didn't increase the tensile strength of these samples, its effect on ductility is useful for applications I'll mention later in the video. But it's important to note that PLA's thermal properties reduce its performance in these high-temperature environments. For example, take the deformations on this print I left outside last summer. The sweltering valley heat brought this print pretty close to the glass transition temperature of PLA, which ranges from 40 to 50 degrees Celsius, causing it to warp. So I thought, what if we take this further? As I needlessly melt this PLA for your entertainment, enjoy the thermal properties of PLA. It's because of its low melting point of 150 to 162 degrees Celsius that PLA is such a great candidate for FDM 3D printing, and also for a wide range of manufacturing processes. But because it starts to lose its mechanical properties at even moderate temperatures, PLA is better suited for prototype creation than mechanical parts. One last cool property I discovered about PLA, it's partially soluble in acetone. But why is that important? It's not. But it's fun. I designed this model of a Naboo starfighter, and I want to see if I can use the partial solubility of PLA and acetone to give it a nice and glossy finish. Cue the build montage. I let the print sit in acetone vapor for a few hours before realizing that not much was happening besides a color change and some increased flexibility. Again, PLA is partially soluble in acetone. This solubility decreases with crystallinity and molecular weight, and the natural fillers added to the PLA filament here don't help either. But thankfully, not all degradations of PLA are as anticlimactic as that. In fact, because PLA breaks down into products that aren't toxic in the human body, PLA is one of the most promising polymers for use in the biomedical field. PLA degrades in the human body over the course of 6 months to 2 years. This rate can be adjusted by changing PLA's crystallinity, which makes it useful for applications like this one. This figure is from a 2016 study by Farah et al., and it shows a screw and a plate made from PLA being used in a surgical operation on a patient's upper jaw. PLA is perhaps better suited to release medication in drug delivery than serve as mechanical fasteners though, because of its brittle nature and lack of impact toughness. Before we wrap up, I've got to mention one last application of PLA, packaging. In 2019, packaging accounted for half of PLA's uses worldwide. Now, I could talk about how PLA is used for Lay's chip bags or McDonald's salad bowls, but where's my motivation in that? Instead, I'll include a shameless plug for my own applications of PLA, board games. Trust me, that was purely for informational purposes. They're available at bonobros.com. Anyway, it's time to wrap up, so I'll conclude by lighting PLA on fire. PLA. It's biodegradable, annually renewable, and highly processable. Its mechanical and thermal properties make it useful not just in 3D printing, but also in applications like biomedicine and packaging. PLA. It's more than filament.